Good afternoon. Today, director Andrew Morgan joins me to talk about his film about Rob Bell, which is entitled The Heretic. Andrew, can you tell me about how you first came across Rob Bell?
I knew who Rob was because I grew up in Atlanta and I grew up in a very religious household. And I remember there was a moment where Rob kind of broke the rules and wrote a book that everybody got really mad about. That's what I remember. And then several years later, here in Los Angeles, I went to a birthday party that our daughters were attending and he was there. And we started a conversation and, started uh, a friendship and a series of conversations that kind of ended up in what became this film.
Amazing. I mean, it feels to me very timely in that he's someone who um, challenges orthodoxy. And are you still in touch with him, or do you have a sense of how he views our current political climate?
Yeah, we're still friends. I think in some ways it's funny thinking about this film this morning because it's been several years. We made this right kind of at the dawn of the first Trump presidency,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting to think about now, like in a way how much has changed, in a way how little has changed. I think in so many ways, like growing up, I kind of moved away from religious stuff and then I think I hit a point where I was like, I don't think you can understand this country at this moment without understanding Christianity and the ways in which Christianity and the larger story of America have become kind of intermingled and so many ways, I would argue, corrupted from the original Christian story. But however you see it, it's simply too important to ignore, and it keeps showing up again and again and again at all these pivotal moments in American history. And I think what we're in the midst of today is, again, you're seeing a really, really resurgent force of something that is very malleable, it turns out, and can be used for a lot of different ends.
We worked on a film. We released a film last year called Bad Faith, which was about the rise of Christian
Yeah.
nationalism and its roots, um, and how, I guess, to your point, a movement, just by calling something a Christian movement doesn't make it necessarily consistent with the values most people who practice Christianity believe in. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's very much like the political system that's so polarized, and people are seeing it from their own silos as opposed to talking and understanding people on other sides. Is
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's one of the things I remember Rob saying early on that really struck me is I remember him saying, you got to be really careful anytime the cross and the flag are held up together because it's dangerous. And I think, we are, you know, that the religious origin of Christianity has its roots in a group of outsiders challenging an empire. And now we are living in the most wealthy, militarily established country in the history of the world, and it changes the context. And so when this story that's been one of championing the people who are on the underside of power gets weaponized by those who are holding the ultimate levers of power, it's dangerous, and there are so many people who their faith in a variety of religions or contexts leads them to be more generous and kind and forgiving. Like there's so much charity, there's so much good that's done. I think what we're really honing in on in the film is be very, very careful when it seeps into the actual chambers of power, because that is a very, very different thing.
right. How much time did you spend filming? How long was your filming period with Rob? I mean, there's footage that seems to predate what you filmed, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some archive stuff. I think we filmed for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. We, yeah, we followed a good bit, and then to your point, we layered in like some of the stuff that had happened. Uh, Big book he wrote, kind of challenging the idea of hell being a literal place, was like the real touchstone, and it's like a Time magazine story and this whole thing. So that kind of presupposed our time. But we were together for a while, and it was interesting because it was in those early Trump years, and he was doing like a book tour like in the Bible Belt, and he was doing so. It was this very volatile time in America, as anyone can remember. And it was a really, really interesting context. We started making the film before Trump got elected the first time, and then that election happened, and it was interesting how the story was the same, but the context became very, very colored by what was taking place.
It's I think for filmmakers starting out, the notion of spending 18 months, 2 years with the same person raises all kinds of challenges. One of which is, as you become more intimate with your subject, how do you balance that feeling of a personal bond with your integrity of as a filmmaker telling the story you want to tell?
It's challenging. I think I've gotten more guarded about it recently, if I'm really being honest. I think this film was very specific in the sense that like I wasn't trying to do this like down the middle expose on Rob. I really wasn't. Like I was trying to hold up and communicate a line of inquiry that I found very, very, very pertinent to the lives that we're all living in this country. But it is something I think about all the time, and it's something that I wrestle with a lot. And sometimes when I look back on films, I'll have little moments where I'll be like, I got a little close with them there, or
Right.
I let them say too much there, or
Right.
it's something that I'm wrestling with constantly, even currently right now, frankly.
No, I mean it's really, we see it often, and we certainly had interviews with other filmmakers who are interviewing, who are doing a documentary about a family member. Like
Hmm.
we have a
Hmm.
film that Donna Zuccaro did about her mother, Geraldine Ferraro,
Mm.
and
Mm.
felt the burden both of the legacy of the first woman to be nominated by a major party to be vice president of this country, and a film about her mother. How do you balance those conflicting um, motivations, and yet it's not restricted to a family member. As you spend time with somebody, a relationship develops, and you're mindful of that, I guess.
Well, and I think it's yeah, no, exactly. I think it's interesting to me that like different films can be different things. Like the more I watch things, I think as long as there's a pretty clear idea up front of what this film is, I'm okay with almost anything. Like I don't think they all need to be old fashioned, like, this side, this side. Yeah, like, I love family member stories, like to your point. I love inside stuff. I love, Rob and I were spending a lot of time together, and we were having a lot of these conversations, and then we started filming them. And I hope that the film feels that way. It's not super adversarial. It's not super
Right,
confrontational.
right.
It really is like you're on a book tour with this guy, and you're in these hotels and these places where he's kind of grappling and trying to communicate something that's not super popular, and yeah, we're kind of along for the ride. Yeah, it's really an interesting thing. I think in a lot of ways, though, the ethics are not as, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think they're as hard and fast as they used to be. I think there's a ton of options. You just have to be clear with each film of what this one is.
Right, right, right.
You think that's right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And once you've set out to make the film you want to make, then you need to stay in that lane to make the film you want to make. Otherwise, it I think you lose your path.
Yeah. Well, and to your point on the time thing, every film I look back on, no matter how long we spent shooting it, I always think I wish we'd spent more. Like, so to that time thing, for any young filmmaker, I'm like, that's the easiest part. That's like just keep chipping away at it. And there's something about time that just like you get a lot of different layers of the onion that starts to peel, you know. I'm in awe of these like, you know, these incredible projects over the years that have been, you know, like decade in the making, or like, you know,
Right.
stuff Steve James or those guys do. It's
Right.
like that's just incredible. That's
For
so
the
cool.
Michael Apted series, I mean, you just with each 7 years, there's so much more clarity that, secrets are revealed just by being there. Um,
What did you think when you looked at the film? Like, how do you look at religion? Like, when religious stuff or faith stuff shows up in movies, how does that hit you?
um, Personally, that's not my interest, but
Mhm.
um, commercially, it's a huge audience. And I think it's important, particularly in the world of documentary film, to touch on topics that will cause people to watch something they may not otherwise watch. I mean, that if you're,
Mhm.
the conception that the people who watch documentaries are kind of the liberal elites on the two coasts is kind of accurate in the main. But increasingly, I think when topics are undertaken that broaden that tent, so I think it's important to have. I'm not the audience particularly, but I think I'm glad I'm helping to bring to audiences films that do have religious content because for many people that's really important. And for to deliver messages that are either um, a bullseye for what they believe or challenge what they believe, but are accessible enough that they'll watch. I think that's really important to just make independent film more accessible for more audiences. Otherwise, I fear, everyone will see Marvel films and no one will see anything else.
No, I appreciate you. You gave the film a real push and a great launch, and I've always been really grateful for that,
Well,
honestly.
thank you. How and on this one, do you get letters from audiences um
We
asking more?
it was very polarizing. I mean, I think when the film came out, it was polarizing inside circles of faith. You know, the film's doing a challenging thing because in one way, we need you to care enough about religion to want to watch a film like this, and then in another way, we're not really just making it for the choir. So,
Right,
uh, it's been really fascinating. I think that there is a sense though that it was I think there was a feeling for people, even if they disagreed, that it was made from a place of love, which was really important to me. Like I didn't want to punch down. Like I didn't want to. It's not hard to like. There's no reward in like making fun of or criticizing something as sensitive and beautiful as faith. I think we were, really trying to keep the aim and the focus again around the power structures that can manipulate that, and I think people felt that. I don't think people felt like insulted, like we weren't
right.
like going for
Well, it
and a
wasn't
lot of people a
insulting,
lot
and I mean, what's great about his character is he's a true believer in his
yeah,
belief system, and
yeah.
you got to respect and appreciate that. I mean, his belief system may be different than the person sitting next to him, but his integrity is the same. And I think
Well,
that's
in the conversation, the question that he raises, and I think this is what we've heard the most from faith leaders over the years who have seen the film, is he's also fundamentally raising this question of how are these ancient traditions going to evolve and expand and continue to move with human progress? And that is a really fascinating question. Everyone from the Vatican to everyone's trying to answer that question. How do we hold on to this precious tradition? And also, how do we acknowledge the fact that these texts were written a very, very, very long time ago into very different cultural contexts? And so, how can we carry it forward so more people can see themselves in these stories? And I think that's an ongoing, unfinished, tense but needed conversation.
no, totally. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. And I know the film is still very popular and will continue to be so in our in our polarized times where we're all searching for answers, I think.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it, man.